It's with great pleasure that I invite to the stage the 2015 winner of the Bathurst 1000 alongside Craig Lowndes, the driver for the laser plumbing and electrical Porsche Carrera Cup car, Mr. Stephen Richards. Now, Stephen, you may not know, served his apprenticeship as an aircraft engineer before taking up full-time racing. So obviously he prefers the speed bumps on the ground, not the turbulence in the air. So that's why he's chosen the racetrack. Stephen is going to share his story of the road he has travelled so far to be the champion of motorsport racing he is today. I know you are going to make him very, very welcome. Please put your hands together for our very special guest speaker this morning, Stephen Richards.
This young man continues to drive away from the rest of the field. Stephen Richards from the Valvoline Formula 4 down into Caltex Chase.
A young man heading for 2-litre touring car racing next year, I believe. Following in his famous father's footsteps, no doubt. And a guy with a ton of potential. He really has shown a clean pair of heels to everyone else in Formula 4 this year.
Stephen Richards and Jason Wright win the FAI 1000 Classic. Unbelievable. Well, that marks a very special moment. Stephen Richards has repeated his father's effort.
He's going to drop a spot in this side by side. Hold your breath, Australia.
Mark Winterbottom will win the Super Cheap Auto Bathurst 1000 with Stephen Richards.
Stephen Richards, his fourth year in Carrera Cup, the laser plumbing and electrical car, wins the title on the Gold Coast. So Stephen Richards is the champ for 2014.
So there you go. Thank you. I'm hopeful that while you've got your social media stuff happening today and you're hashtagging your World Plumbers Day, and also we get involved next year, we create a Cuddle a Plumber hashtag, all right? We all deserve a bit of love on this day, so I'm hoping that's where we end up. But look, I guess my journey is very similar to most other race car drivers. Our paths differ a little bit, but as you can see here, go-karting is fairly well where we kick off our careers. You know, go-karting, whether you're a 15-year-old kid or you can get involved in go-karting at 7 years old. The process of what go-karting gives you will hold you in good stead for wherever you go in the future of your career. So, when I was 15, I had a friend of my dad's, and my father Jim. He's I guess a legend of Australian motor racing, been around a long time, and he was probably a little bit slow off the mark in getting me involved, and I probably didn't really, because I was involved in the family business from a spectator, and I was Dad's biggest supporter, but I never really thought to get involved. And anyway, what happened one Friday night, we used to have fish and chips on a Friday night. Everyone used to come over to our place, and one of Dad's mates bought a go-kart, and he said, "Hey, I'm going out tomorrow in my kart for the first time. Do you want to come and have a drive?" I thought, oh yeah, that's not a bad thing to do. So basically from that Saturday morning in I think it was 1988, as a 15-year-old, I was in hook, line and sinker. That was pretty well all I wanted to do. I gave up on my footy and my cricket and invested everything as a 15-year-old. I think I sacrificed my Commodore 64 computer, sold that in the trading post, went up and bought a go-kart. And that there is my first go-kart. That's how it all started. And I think, when you've got something that you love, something that you want to do so much, you make a lot of sacrifices, and even at that point, I was never ever expecting that I'd move on to do the things that I've managed to do since then. But a great way to start and a good grounding. So where do you go from go-karts? Well, back when I was in my junior categories of motor racing, Formula Ford was the place to go. It's changed a little bit now. Formula Ford still exists, and it's still a very popular form of the sport. And I spent the first year at a low level doing the Victorian State Racing Series, and I'm from Melbourne. And then slowly over the next couple of years got involved in the National Series, and in 1994 was lucky enough to win the Formula Ford Championship, which at the time was probably the best path for a young guy to go. There's a few different paths now, but in doing that, at the same period of time, as Lee mentioned, I motor racing wasn't a given, and potentially I was going to have to find a real job, and that for me was in the aircraft industry, and I got an apprenticeship as an aircraft mechanic, and basically I was spending all of my time when I wasn't driving cars or towing them to the racetrack. I was working on airplanes, and then in 1994, that was the first year out of my trade. I'd finished the trade. I was a full-time aircraft engineer, and at the same point in time, we won the championship, and then all of a sudden, my life pretty well flipped on its head, and I was approached by a guy who many of you will know if you follow motor racing, Gary Rogers. And basically at that point, Gary formalised and started up Gary Rogers Motorsport as the version that it is right now. So I was Gary's first guy. And at the time, there were two of us. And part of my job back then, and like it is now in all forms of the sport, other than V8 supercars, I was a driver in the team, but I was also a mechanic during the week. And I was getting my hands dirty and prepping the car and driving the truck to the race meeting and doing all of the sponsorship stuff and helping out where I could. So life's, believe it or not, life's evolved, and I'm now doing pretty well what I was doing back then, but I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So at the time, I drove and it started, as you can see, the little Valvoline Alfa Romeo there. We kicked off pretty well my first year with Gary in 1995. There were two touring car championships. One was for 2-litre racing cars, one was for V8s. There's a bit of confusion in the Australian motorsport landscape as to where the path should be taken. Should we stay with big gas-guzzling V8s, or should we go down the path of efficient 2-litre touring cars? And Gary elected in the first year to go down the path of 2-litre touring cars, and we mixed it with many of the factory teams from BMW and Audi as a little privateer entity in that little Alfa Romeo. Then over the next few years, I drove for a number of teams. I left Gary Rogers Motorsport, went to Europe, tried my hand over there as a test driver, hoping to achieve success and get a drive in the British Touring Car Championship. So I was over there for 12 months with Nissan, and that was a great experience, being out of my comfort zone, learning about who Steve Richards was, what made him tick, and then at the same time I came back to Bathurst to co-drive with Jason Bright and the Stone Brothers racing team, and we won Bathurst. So then that all of a sudden kick-started a whole new avenue of potential success for me here back in Australia. And I worked out at that point in time too that the Australian V8 Touring Car Championship, as it was in those days, was growing and getting bigger and bigger, and definitely Australia was a place to be in terms of world-class motor racing. So I chose to come back to Australia. Then drove for Gibson Motorsport in the Kmart Racing Commodore for a year. After two years with those guys, a year with Glenn Seaton's team at Ford Tickford Racing and the factory Ford team as it was back then. And then on with a guy, many of you will know, Larry Perkins, who was retiring from motor racing and looking to fill a position there. So I stepped into Larry's shoes and drove with Larry's team for 5 years. Eventually getting to the lusty heights of driving for Ford Performance Racing. So bit of a prostitute myself between Ford and Holden, wherever looked the best option to go over those times. But as a driver, that's your role, and sometimes the opportunities when you're out of contract or you're looking for a new drive aren't necessarily with the particular team or the particular manufacturer you're with. So there's genuine reason behind that. And over those times, so finished my full-time career with Ford Performance Racing in 2010. And had 4 years with those guys, and then continued on in a co-driving role. So along the way, had a reasonable amount of success. Naturally, they're the ones that tick the box on the resume for sure in terms of those Bathurst successes. Never quite got to the championship. We were in contention for many years in the mid-2000s, but never quite got over the line. But won plenty of races, and to win that race, to stand on the podium, to finish in the top 5 at that race. It's our mecca. Bathurst is what motor racing in Australia and the culture of motor racing is really built around that event, going back in the tradition, back from the very early 60s through to now. You know, we all generally turn on the tally on that day and have a look what's going on over the course of the weekend. So, but other highlights, you know, over the course of that time, motor racing's great because in terms of generations, it's not like the ball sports, the footies or the NRLs or whatever the case may be, AFL, because you get to actually can share your career with a sibling or with a father. And in my case, Dad Jim, he was competing in the V8 Touring Car Championship up until 1995, and he retired. So then in 1996, basically, and you don't think about this at the time because you're just a young bloke trying to make your way, and you're with your team, and your team consists of many people, not obviously just the driver. And Dad could have driven with anyone, but he chose to drive with Gary Rogers Motorsport and be a part of our team because he wanted to help a young team come up through the ranks. So in 1997, and like I said, you don't think of it at the time because it's just a process you're going through as part of your career, but we actually stood on the podium at Bathurst and finished second together. So that now, you know, when I look back at that sort of thing, imagine doing that. Imagine, you know, in your own business, and I'm sure many of you here, you know, are passing on your business through to your son or your daughter, and being able to share that experience. Well, that's no different to what we do in our game. So, you know, the biggest race of the year, to be able to stand on the podium and miss out on the win by only 3 seconds, that was fantastic. And sometimes it's those things. It's the times that you've finished 5th, but you've come from the back of the field through some adversity, and you've got over the line for that result. Some of those actually rank higher, personally for me in my own mind, than anyone would ever know. So, all good stuff. Now, of course, last year, you know, an unbelievable moment to be driving alongside Lowndesy. You know, it's my second year with the Red Bull racing team in 888, and it just goes to show what a huge industry the V8 Supercar series is. Now, those guys you see there, that was in the garage after the race, but that's only about 60% of that team, and they're all full-time employees, every one of them. You know, you're talking about 55 or 60 people work at 888 here. They're just up the road here in Banyo, and the reason, I mean, back when I was with Gary Rogers Motorsport, even Gary Rogers Motorsport now is about 45 people. Back when we were 2 people, how that evolves is through competitiveness. Now, you guys work on you know, your KPIs are your margin at the end of the year and the profit that you make. But for motor racing, it's a lot different. Motor racing, our KPIs are thousandths of a second. What you're willing to do to get those thousandths of a second. And that's essentially why the teams have become so big. To give you an understanding, you know, back when I was with Gary Rogers, in order for we had to make a new component of the car, we had to go and outsource the design and the manufacture of that component to an engineering company. Now, sometimes they were busy, so it might take 3 or 4 weeks to get that component back to us so that we could get on the car to go and test, and then we might find a time gain. Say we found 1/10 of a second. Fantastic. That could be 3 or 4 positions on the grid. But in order to fast track that, you need to be able to have those turnaround times really small. And that's why these teams have grown so big. You know, now, you know, you might have 3 or 4 engineering staff in the design office that are helping engineer the car, but they're designing components. And rather than send the drawing or that component down the road to an outside contractor, they now have that manufacturing process in-house. So they can get those things turned around and be on the car within days, and sometimes within hours. If there's something that needs to be on the car for a race weekend, they can have that turned around and done in an hour. So you're always talking in thousandths of a second. You know, you need your marketing team and your corporate communications people. They've got to be on the phone chasing the funding. You can imagine a team like this with 60 people, you're talking of $10 million a year to run 2 cars. That's huge. That's huge. So every person then has a role, and it's important that each and every one of those people stick to the role that they have within that business. And a driver is no different. So when I was coming through the ranks, you know, I started as a mechanic, and you know, then I was driving the truck or whatever, or in the truck on the way to the race meetings. I was helping organise, you know, the logistics of what we were doing. As that grew, I became less involved in that, and it was more of a focus about me just filling the role of a professional race car driver. Now, what does that mean? That means going to sponsor events and helping out in the workshop with the engineering stuff. You know, what are we going to do? Where do we need to go with trying to make these cars go faster? How can we achieve more success? And keeping fit. You know, the extremes in these cars, the temperatures inside, I'm sure you've all heard it, and it's very real, is whatever the ambient temperature is outside, add 25 degrees to the inside cabin temperature. You've got big 600 horsepower heaters in the front of these race cars with big exhaust pipes that travel right underneath the car. There's no air conditioning because that saps horsepower from the engine. We can't have that. That's costly performance. So over the time, you have to keep really fit. And in a lot of cases, that's all about managing heat stress, training very hard. You know, I remember when, 5 or 6 years ago, well, more than that now, 7 or 8 years ago when I was a full-time driver, you know, most of my day would be well, a lot of my day, at least 2 hours of that day would be involved in training and keeping fit. So it's a big industry and it keeps getting bigger. But then I finished up doing that. I'm still obviously a co-driver with these guys. In 2011, I started to fill that role. But I needed a new challenge. I still loved motorsport. I was probably a little bit sick and tired of the pressure to perform when things were against you, and a lot of the time commitment that involved being away from home. But I still loved the driving aspect. So I was lucky enough, and this is where my personal journey with laser plumbing and electrical started. We spoke to Steve Kyle, who's the managing director of Laser Plumbing and Electrical, and they were very keen to set themselves apart in the marketplace from their competitors. And I had been looking at the Porsche Carrera Cup Championship as a way to kick my own business off. And the beauty of that was the Porsche Carrera Cup Championships are one make series. They're all fantastic. These Porsches that you see here, they're all identical. So if you do a good job, there's very limited things you can change. You can't go and design new components. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to rebuild your engine without it being inspected and sealed. The category managers seal the engine, which means there's no cheap motor racing, but it means there's a really good way that you can start from the ground up and get into the marketplace and provide something that, for whether it's a sponsor or a team member, provide a really stable platform that you can go racing at a relatively economical cost. So we went down this path. We've created this great program with these guys. We're now in our 6th year together. Now they're very similar, laser plumbing and electrical, to the way that we go racing. You know, they have great systems and processes. They like to be involved at the cutting edge and involved with good quality people and obviously performance. So it's been a really good measure. We do lots of things for them. You can see one of the ladies there. We have a customer hot lap ride program that we get involved with, and that's, you know, sponsorship's about many things. It's not just about the car heading off on the racetrack with your name emblazoned on it. You know, there are lots of assets that we have to use to generate the return on investment that's required for a company to get involved with us. And as I said before, you know, I've gone from being the professional driver that literally in the V8 supercar era, I used to rock up with my helmet. Okay, where's the car? Point me in the direction. I'll go and hop in it and go and drive around. Whereas now I'm back to doing what I was doing at Gary Rogers Motorsport. You know, I'm driving the truck to the race meetings, our big 45-foot transporter. I drive the race car. If I don't quite get the budget for a particular year, I'm handy on the tools so I can get in and do the work on the car. And in a lot of ways, I'm absolutely no different to your businesses that you control day in, day out. We've all got a target. We've got a budget that we work to. Some years things are fantastic, and you can do all the things that you need to do. I can employ contractors to work on my car. I can essentially be the driver. I can step away. I can get a truck driver to drive the truck from Townsville back to Melbourne because, you know, to get some time off. But then there are other times where I can't do that. There are other times where, you know, to make ends meet, I've got to get down to the coalface and work hard on ensuring that, you know, I get the result that's still expected from us, and that's to get results, but also roll out the things that we've agreed to with our sponsors. So look, it's been a great journey. I've cut things very short because I know we're time constrained a little bit. thanks for having me, and wish you all the best on this fantastic day. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Please don't leave. I need you to help me with a few things. But first of all, I just want to ask a question. So come on over here to your little microphone here. 1998, I think this is right, you finished second, only 2 seconds behind your dad at the AMP Bathurst 1000 run for Super Touring Cars.
Very good, Lee.
Well,
That's
I just
very
wanted to
good.
ask, now probably everyone else is going, what is she going to ask? My question is, at the end of it, did he turn around and say to you, son, you should have just put your foot to the pedal and gone a bit faster? Or did you say, Dad, I took it easy on you? Like, what was the conversation after that?
Well, do you know what it's like? You're always trying to beat your dad. You know, from a young age, you're always trying to aspire to be better than him. And on that day, it was an incredible race. So it was for the 2-litre touring cars, and there was a bit of a television network battle going on between Network 7 and Channel 10. And 10 had the V8s, and 7 had the traditional date with the 2-litre cars. And we raced all day long. All day, the cars were separated by no more than 5 seconds for 1,000 kilometres. 2 cars. And it was basically a race of 2 cars between us and the Volvo. But what they'd done in order to sort of, I guess, spruik the event up a little bit, they wanted to coincide me and Dad's driving stints together, and then the 2 overseas drivers that we had as partners, for them to race together. And I've got to say, I knocked him off. And it's probably one of the only times during my stints I always managed to get ahead of him somehow. But it's probably the first time I was actually able to get one up on him.
All right, so that was a little story we missed, but thank you for filling that one in. Now also a big thank you to Laser Plumbing and Electrical for sponsoring our guest speaker today, which has been fantastic. Really do appreciate it. Now, you're going to head outside to the foyer very shortly, so if anyone would like a photo opportunity or any merchandise signed, you can certainly do that. And I do have a special gift for you, Stephanie, if you could. Please don't drink this before you drive. Just a little tip there, but enjoy, I know you will. Now, one other thing before you go. This is pretty exciting. We have an announcement to make. I don't know if you realise this, but we are. 2 lucky people, one. I'm going to do one. One. Sorry, the odds have gone down. 1 lucky person in the room today is going to do 2 hot laps. That's what I was going to say. 2 hot laps in the Laser Racing Team's Porsche GT3 race car alongside you. He will take it easy, so you can...
You won't be driving, though. You won't be driving. You'll be a passenger. Just to make that clear.
Can you sort of pick the speed you want and the music you want played and stuff?
We will just go flat out. That's what it's all right. We'll just go flat out.
All right, so how do you win this? Very easy, and I want you to be very well behaved when you do this. Under your seat is an envelope which will say, please make your way to the stage. If you've got a spare seat beside you, have a look. But please only look under yours. If there's someone is sitting on the other seat, don't go under their seat. Let's keep it clean and see if we have a winner. All right, we've got anyone? It's definitely under a seat. It's an envelope. Oh, right up the back. There we go. Come on down. Now, if you had won a race, you'd be racing down here, wouldn't you? So a little bit more speed would be great. Here he comes. Very leisurely. I think he's excited. Maybe he holds it on the inside. All right. This is Tim, everyone. Tim Pitt. That's a good name for a race car. From Pit Stop. There you go. No, it's actually Pitt Plumbing Service. Okay, now I'm just going to go over here because congratulations. Is this something you have always wanted to do?
I guess so. Yeah. I sort of am a pretty cautious driver at home, but wouldn't mind seeing what it's really like to get, push to the pedal.
No caution. You have to wear a seatbelt though. What do you drive, just out of curiosity?
My car, my work ute. Yeah. I've got a Ford Ranger, so I'm a Ford man. So.
Is that all right? We're still no problem with that one. All right, fantastic. Well, definitely, you'll definitely enjoy this moment. Be very memorable. You'll be able to tell your kids about it. But you might like to go and have a chat with Stephen outside and just tell him, what speed you would like. I'm sure it'll help. But would you please put your hands together for our very special guest speaker, Stephen Richards, and well done, Tim.